Keth was a scout who drifted above the blue and white sphere in silence while his ship kept to a smooth orbit. Below him, Earth turned with oceans shining like mirrors and continents alive with the scatter of light. He had flown many surveys for the Pirate Coalition before, and he knew what a weak world looked like. A weak world tried to hide its fear with bright banners and a loud parade of false defenses. He found none of that here. He found a planet that seemed open to anyone brave or foolish enough to try a strike. He saw no giant war platforms circling in high orbit, and no heavy weapons on the ground that could punch holes into ships. He logged that the planet carried countless satellites, but each one hummed with harmless work like weather watch, crop study, traffic flow, education relay, and family talk. Not one pulsed the power of a military array. The report almost wrote itself as, Earth looked soft and defenseless. When he passed over the dark half of the world, he noted the glowing web of city lights. It was messy and uneven, but warm like a hearth fire. Other planets often carried strict lines of defense that turned every city into a fortress. Earth's lights carried no such order. They glowed in patterns of people, not soldiers. He marked the ground ports and shipyards he could see. Most were small and built freighters, tugs, medical craft and fishing boats with strong ribs for hard seas. Few built war hulls, and those few were minor compared to what a true navy could field. He added all this to his notes, yet something itched in his mind. The picture did not feel like weakness alone. It felt like a mask covering something else. He flew over coastal towns and found piers where monuments carried names carved in stone and steel. He saw people touch those names before they boarded small rescue craft. He saw drills where even old women checked seals and young children counted emergency packs. These did not feel like forced measures of fear. They felt like habits woven into life until no one thought of them as training anymore. Keth had flown above real weak worlds where drills were rare and where ceremonies made noise without strength. This world was the opposite. It was quiet about its drills and loud only in song and trade. He continued his circuit, and on the far side of the orbit, he came across a beacon clinging to a lonely rock. The device was old, simple, and honest, sending a steady pulse on a frequency no military cared about. Keth tuned in and heard a calm voice repeating the same phrase in old Earth tongues and also in the wide trade language. If you are lost, call, and we will come. The words were plain, yet carried a promise strong enough to make his chest heavy. He did not know why a poor beacon carried such weight, but he logged it anyway and flew on. The raid came 2 days later. A small Earth station at the edge of their reach was chosen because it seemed soft and rich. It was a place of gardens, a mill and a cafe that sold sweetbread to miners. The pirates cut the power and stormed through the doors, taking hostages, while they laughed. They planned to demand ransom or supplies as they always did. Keth remained just outside the detection shell, listening and watching. One message slipped out before the raiders jammed the bands. It ran through a maintenance channel too small to close without killing the air. The message carried only 8 simple words in Old Earth tongue and 8 more in trade speech. We ring. The bell for home, please come now. After that came a long chain of names, kin marks, debts, friendships, and memories. It was unlike any distress call he had ever seen. It was not sent to a navy or to officials. It was sent to everyone who could hear. The first response was a tug from Luna, with a hull worn by years of labor and a captain with burned hands. She pushed her engines past safety to reach the station. Behind her came a medical shuttle from a small university and then a scatter of fishing boats fitted with odd cages and drones. The pirates laughed until the tug dropped bright flares and cut their vector field like a saw. The medical shuttle patched corridors with quick foam that sealed guns and saved air. The fishing boats released drones that flew like curious birds, until they latched onto raider hulls and would not let go. Keth saw it all unfold and felt a strange calm. There was no single command, yet the ships moved as if they shared one mind. Voices crossed the bands like a heartbeat. I see you. I cover your left. Hold your right. Every name called brought another name to the fight. The raiders cut lines and tried to escape, but they met not panic but a wall of focus. It looked not like anger, but like a family that had been interrupted at dinner, and now rose to push the intruders away. Keth saved every detail for his report, but in his private log he wrote a question. How do you fight a world that answers a bell like that, the bell that never sleeps? The message that slipped through the raider blockade spread farther and faster than any pirate sensor could trace. It carried no encryption and no code of power, yet it rang across human space like a chime no one could ignore. A miner orbiting Saturn picked it up and passed it to his sister on Mars, who sent it through a trade guild channel to a cousin on Titan. A student on Ceres, who had once shared a classroom with a boy on the captured station, read the names and relayed them into half a dozen networks she barely remembered signing on to. Each time the list of names grew longer, and each time another. Hand took the chain and pulled more hands with it. The pirates thought they had silenced their prey, but what they had done instead was strike the oldest human instinct, which was to call for family. Keth sat in his ship high above the chaos and listened. He had never heard so many signals travel, in so many different directions at once. There was no central beacon guiding them, but the calls moved with a strange harmony. The phrase, "We ring the bell for home," repeated in hundreds of voices, some old, some young, some laughing to keep fear away, some grim with rage. He began to realize the pirates had not attacked a station at all. They had struck a thread woven into thousands of lives, and now that thread pulled the whole cloth tight. Within hours, more ships gathered. A hauler carrying ore from Jupiter turned around even though it risked profit penalties. A group of small yachts owned by merchants swung in with fuel tanks strapped to their decks so they could push their engines past design. A hospital freighter, on routine patrol, diverted and loaded every berth with extra nurses and medics. None of these were warships yet when they arrived. They moved like pieces of a body with one will. The tug from Luna became the heart of the defense, its captain steady even with burns on her hands, and her voice filled the band with quiet orders that were not orders, but simple requests. Every ship responded with the same rhythm, as if they had trained for this moment, though Keth knew they had not. The raiders began to panic. Their plan had been simple: take hostages, demand ransom, and leave before any formal fleet could arrive. They did not understand how a civilian network could become a fleet faster than a navy could react. They cut deeper into the station, trying to set demolition charges as a warning, but the medical shuttle docked at an airlock and sent students with patch kits through smoke and fire. The students moved without fear, guided by voices on the net, and they pulled civilians out in long chains of hand-to-hand grip. The pirates fired, but every corridor became smoke and foam and tangled drones that locked down weapons. The hostages began to fight back with simple tools. A cook with burns on his arm slammed a pan into a raider's helmet, and a gardener with soil under her nails jammed a spade into a power pack. None of it looked professional, yet all of it worked, because each person knew someone was behind them, ready to catch them if they fell. Keth felt the pressure under his ribs grow stronger. He had been hired to measure risk, yet what he watched could not be measured in the normal way. This was not strength of guns or shields. It was strength of connection. Every call on the band pulled in another ally. Messages poured from deep colonies far from Earth. A pilot who once owed a debt to a cousin of a hostage was already burning fuel toward the system. A convoy of merchant ships shifted course because one of the names on the list belonged to a woman who had once delivered medicine to them during a plague. Keth realized the distress call had become more than a cry for help. It was a reminder of every tie humans had built with each other and with anyone who had shared even a moment of kindness. The Coalition Lord demanded answers again. He wanted to know how many hidden fleets Earth commanded. He wanted to know what code had activated this wave of ships. Keth could not explain. He saw no code and no fleet. He saw a habit of answering bells, a habit practiced until it became law deeper than any treaty. He told the Lord only part of the truth, that human ships were gathering, but he kept the deeper truth for himself, because he could feel it now like a drumbeat in his own blood. The raiders made one last push to escape. They blasted corridors, burned engines, and tried to push through the tug and the fishing boats, but every time they thought they had space, another small craft appeared, guided in by the endless chain of names. The pirates found themselves surrounded not by soldiers, but by people who refused to let go of each other. They broke formation and scattered, leaving behind damage and wounded, but failing to take their prize. When the last pirate ship fled into the dark, the network of voices did not fall silent. It carried on, checking names, calling families, making sure every person was accounted for. Keth sat alone in his ship, listening as the bell kept ringing in quiet voices. It never seemed to stop. It passed from mouth to mouth, from ship to ship, from planet to planet, as if humanity had built not a defense system, but a living alarm that no enemy could silence. He understood now why the first message had called it a bell. Once rung, it did not stop until home was safe again. The web of debts and favors. The pirate coalition licked its wounds and tried to make sense of the failure. In their long careers, they had stripped dozens of colonies, seized wealth from worlds that were weak or slow, and vanished before fleets could muster. Yet this time their raid had turned into a retreat before ships that should never have been counted as war vessels. They had not fought destroyers or carriers. They had been driven back by tugs and yachts and students with patch foam. The lords of the coalition demanded explanations, and they turned their anger on Keth. They asked what hidden military code Earth had used, what secret doctrine had mobilized its people so quickly. Keth hesitated because what he had seen was not something that fit the usual language of war. He told them the truth as best he could. There was no hidden code. There was no deep fleet. There was only a call for help that had touched a network of ties too wide to track. He explained that humans seemed to live in a web of debts and favors that bound them across systems. Every miner owed a mechanic, every trader owed a farmer, every student carried the memory of someone who had shared food or medicine or shelter. The list of names that went out from the station was not a request to a command structure. It was a string, pulled across the web, and once it moved, everyone who was tied to it moved as well. The pirate lord sneered at his words and called them excuses, but Keth knew what he had seen. The web revealed itself again in the days that followed. Even after the raiders had fled, ships kept arriving. Some came too late for the battle, but not too late to bring supplies and repairs. They carried spare fuel, fresh food, replacement hull plates, medical kits, and hands to work. No one asked for payment. They gave because the names on the list had brushed against their own lives at some point. A doctor who had once been rescued from a shuttle fire by a man on the station brought his entire clinic crew without hesitation. A trader who remembered an engineer fixing her ship during a storm donated her entire cargo hold of grain. The pirates had expected to take wealth, but instead they had triggered a flood of it rushing toward Earth's people. Keth followed the chatter on the open bands. He noticed how debts were not spoken of as burdens. They were spoken of as honors. When someone said, "I owe her," or "he saved me," it was not shame but pride. The favor was a thread that bound them into the larger cloth. He began to understand that this was why Earth looked undefended. They did not invest their power in fortresses and guns. They invested it in ties between people, ties that could turn in an instant into strength more flexible than any standing fleet. The coalition tried to regroup. They spoke of launching a larger raid with heavier ships to crush this so-called web. Yet Keth warned them quietly that more weight might not bring victory. He reminded them that the first strike had not been answered by warships but by ordinary people. He feared what might happen if a true fleet tried to burn human homes. The pirates laughed at his caution and said that Earth's softness had tricked even him. Still, he could see unease in their eyes because deep inside, they knew a truth. Their raid had been defeated by something they could not measure. How then? Would they face the full measure of it? Meanwhile, the humans carried on as if what had happened was no more than a duty fulfilled. The station was repaired piece by piece. Gardens were replanted, the cafe reopened, and children returned to their classrooms. The bell had been answered, and now life moved forward. Yet the bonds had grown tighter. Every ship that had come now carried a new favor owed, a new tie forged in the fire. Keth listened to their voices and heard no fear of the pirates. He heard determination and quiet pride. The web had grown stronger, not weaker, because of the attack. One night in his lonely orbit, Keth asked himself what it would mean to fight an enemy like this. Armies could be broken. Fleets could be destroyed. But how did one destroy a habit of standing together? A custom that turned every small kindness into a weapon when danger struck. He thought of the beacon he had heard on the lonely rock. one that had said, "If you are lost, call and we will come." Now he understood. The web was not just bonds between people. It was the living promise that the call would always be answered. The pirates could not silence that with any weapon he knew. As he drifted above the shining earth once more, he felt the weight inside his chest grow heavier. It was no longer only fear. It was a respect that bordered on awe. He realized then why no empire, no pirate fleet, and no rival species had truly tried to conquer Earth in the open. The planet might look defenseless, but its strength lived in places scanners could not touch, in ties of debt, friendship, family, and memory. He suspected the coalition would soon learn that lesson the hard way, but he feared they would not believe him until it was too late. The open hand doctrine, the council of pirate lords, argued long into the dark of their flagship chamber. They spoke of shame and lost profit and the need to strike harder. Some demanded firebomb raids on Earth's colonies, while others called for capturing a major city to break morale. They believed fear was the answer because fear had always been the answer in their world. They did not understand why it had failed here. Keth stood silent in the chamber until one lord demanded his account again. He repeated his warning that Earth was not weak, though it looked soft. He told them the humans held their hands open as long as they could, but when they closed them, it was final. The lords laughed, calling his words superstition, but the phrase lodged in their minds. Open hand until closed. On Earth itself, leaders and families spoke quietly in homes and halls. They did not boast of the victory at the station, because to them it was not a victory. It was simply what must be done when the bell rang. Earth's Council of Nations met, in a modest chamber where translators whispered across dozens of tongues. They debated not whether to fight, but how to remain themselves while fighting. One elder stood and spoke of the open hand. She said Earth's power came from mercy and from trust. The open hand welcomed trade, welcomed friendship, welcomed the lost and the broken. If Earth closed its hand too quickly, it would crush the very thing that gave it strength. The others nodded because they knew she was right. The world had chosen, long ago, not to build its power on domination but on bonds. The raiders mistook this mercy for fear. They believed that if they pressed harder, the humans would bend. Keth tried to explain the difference, but his words fell like stones into water. He remembered the memorial piers where names were carved. He remembered the children counting packs. He realized mercy was not weakness. Mercy was training. Mercy was patience until the moment came when patience ended. As days passed, more stories surfaced. Traders spoke of ships that had vanished in past decades when they had crossed Earth too, harshly. Records showed no battles, no declarations, only ships that went missing and were never seen again. Survivors whispered that they had been hunted by shadows with human voices, who gave warnings once and then struck without pause. None of it was written in official logs, but Keth saw the pattern. Earth let insults pass. Earth allowed raids to fade away. But when a line was crossed, the hand closed, and when it closed, nothing escaped. The doctrine of the open hand shaped everything about them. It explained why their ships were built to save and not to kill. It explained why their distress call was a bell instead of a command code. They held themselves open to each other and to strangers because that openness gathered strength. Each kindness became another thread in the web. The pirates saw a gap in the wall. What they were truly looking at was a door left open so that others could come inside. Keth sat alone in his ship, writing these thoughts into a secret file. He did not know why he bothered, because no pirate lord would read it with understanding. Perhaps he wrote it for himself because he had begun to fear the road they were walking. The coalition believed Earth defenseless because it chose mercy. They did not see the storm waiting when mercy was finally spent. Meanwhile, in a small classroom on the repaired station, a teacher told her children about the raid. She did not speak of fear. She spoke of how everyone came when the bell was rung, and how that was the heart of being human. The children nodded, and one asked why humans did not build bigger guns. The teacher smiled and said, because our strength is not in the gun, it is in the hand that holds another hand. Someday, she warned softly, the pirates will learn what it means when that hand stops holding and closes into a fist. Keth's ship circled Earth again, and he looked down at the quiet world. To the coalition, it seemed a prize waiting to be taken. To him, it seemed like a trap laid with patience. He knew the pirates would not listen until they felt the fist. He could only wonder how many would survive the lesson. Ghost lessons. The coalition. Lords argued until their voices broke, and finally they made their decision. They would strike Earth not with raids on outposts or stations, but with a concentrated attack meant to tear open the planet's heart. They gathered ships from their far territories, sleek hunters, heavy destroyers, carriers filled with boarding, craft. Their banners promised plunder and their voices promised revenge. They believed they would carve their names into history by being the first to humble a world that looked undefended. Keth listened and said nothing because he knew they were walking toward a lesson older than their fleet. As their ships moved through the void, whispers of human history began to surface among the lower ranks. Pirates spoke in hushed tones of battles that had never been recorded in official ledgers yet still lived in rumor. They spoke of fleets that had disappeared when they strayed too close to Earth. They spoke of commanders who laughed at human weakness and then were never seen again. Keth searched through scattered records and found fragments of truth hidden in trade archives and family stories. These were the ghost lessons, the tales no empire ever admitted yet everyone quietly feared. One record told of a raider group a century earlier that struck a convoy near Mars. They thought Earth would wait weeks to answer, but within days their ships were surrounded by civilian craft that fought with desperate unity. None of the raiders returned. Another spoke of a mercenary company that landed on a colony to hold it for ransom. When the ransom was not paid, they tried to burn the settlement. Survivors said human miners came out of the ground with cutters and drills, tearing through armor like it was paper. The mercenaries vanished. Their ships left adrift and stripped. These were not tales of official wars, but of encounters where Earth's patience snapped and its fist closed without mercy. Keth read more and found that every story carried the same pattern. Humans endured insult, bore losses, and gave mercy longer than any other species would. But when they decided a line had been crossed, they moved with terrifying finality. They did not send warnings twice. They did not negotiate endlessly. They struck until the threat was gone, and then they returned to their open hand as if nothing had happened. This rhythm of mercy, followed by ruthless closure, explained why no great power had launched a full invasion in living memory. The lesson had been learned quietly, burned into rumor and memory, not shouted in victory parades. As the coalition armada drew closer, Keth watched the humans prepare. They did not build giant war machines overnight because they had never relied on such weapons. Instead, they drilled harder in their communities, they tested their tugs and shuttles, they spread the bell signal farther across the networks. He saw families practicing evacuations as calmly as evening prayers. He saw children counting food packs while elders taught them how to seal corridors. None of it looked like fear. It looked like rehearsal for a song they had sung before. The pirates dismissed these signs. They said humans were only pretending, that no real defense could be built from such tools. They laughed at the idea of miners with cutters or farmers with drones standing against warships. But Keth knew better now. He had seen the ghost lessons in his research, and he had seen the web of debts and favors come alive with one call. He understood that the pirates were walking into the same story repeated through history. A predator strikes, a bell rings, and the open hand closes. On the night before the fleet made its final jump, Keth sat alone at his console and stared at the blue world turning far away. He remembered the beacon on the lonely rock with its simple promise, "If you are lost, call and we will come." He realized that promise was the secret weapon no scanner could detect. It was not technology or fleets, but a culture, a reflex, a vow that had outlasted empires. He wondered how many more ghost lessons the pirates would add to the hidden history of Earth once the battle began. The lords of the coalition drank to their coming victory, blind to the weight of names carved into stone and whispered in halls. Keth felt only dread, for he knew that when humans fought with their fists closed, they fought with the memory of every ancestor who had fallen before, and he knew the pirates had chosen to awaken that memory once again. When home stands up the coalition, fleet emerged from its final jump in a storm of engines and arrogance. Hundreds of ships filled the void. their banners pulsing with signals of conquest, their guns armed and hot. The pirate lords believed they had come to claim an easy prize. Earth lay before them, turning quietly under the light of its star, with no fortress platforms, no shield grids, no waiting armada. To the pirates, it looked like prey at last delivered into their hands. Yet as the first strike wings broke away to descend on orbital stations, something unexpected stirred. The bell had already rung long before they arrived. Across the orbits of the Moon and Mars, small vessels gathered. Not warships, but a tide of fishing boats, mining craft, hospital shuttles, and tug fleets. They were painted in the colors of trade, companies, schools, and family guilds, but now their colors blended into a single mosaic. They did not move like random ships. They moved with rhythm as if a great invisible conductor guided them. On every frequency, Keth heard the steady heartbeat of voices passing short calls. Left clear, hold steady. Mine on your flank, drones away. There was no admiral barking orders, yet somehow there was order all the same. The first pirate squadrons dove toward the planet expecting panic. Instead, they found themselves flying into clouds of drones launched from what looked like ordinary freighters. The drones were crude in design but clever in purpose, built from repurposed tools, survey bots, even toy craft, upgraded with lethal intent. They swarmed like flocks of birds, clogging engines, chewing sensors, tearing lines. The pirates fired wildly, but every drone destroyed was replaced by another drawn from endless bays of converted civilian holds. Behind the drones came the tugs, their heavy frames slamming into pirate hulls with brute force, engines burning hot enough to bend metal. On the surface of the Moon, old excavation rigs powered up their cannons, weapons originally meant to break stone but now turned toward ships. On Earth itself, towers opened to reveal launch tubes for rescue craft modified into missile carriers. Farmers rolled out field tractors that had been fitted with rail slings. Firefighters launched into orbit on refitted shuttles with hoses replaced by plasma sprayers that cut through hull plating. Everywhere Keth looked, he saw ordinary people standing up, as if the planet itself had risen to defend its children. The pirates tried to regroup. Their destroyers formed lines and opened fire. For a moment, the humans fell back under the storm. But then the voices on the network grew louder and steadier. The names of the lost were spoken aloud, each one answered by a promise of vengeance and protection. The line reformed and surged forward. Boarding parties of miners cut into pirate ships through vents and hull seams, wielding drills and cutters, with the precision of long practice. Medical crews boarded behind them, not with weapons but with stretchers, turning captured ships into mobile hospitals the moment the fighting ended. Keth sat in his ship watching the coalition plan collapse. He realized the pirates had misunderstood the meaning of defense. They thought defense was walls and guns. For humans, defense was people, and when home was threatened, every person became a soldier, whether they carried a weapon or not. The pirates struck one city with heavy fire, but within minutes rescue tunnels opened and families emerged armed with whatever they could carry. A choir that had been rehearsing in a church turned into a coordination hub, its singers guiding drones and mapping escape routes with the same harmony they had used in song. The coalition lords screamed over their channels demanding control, but control was already gone. Their fleets were trapped in a storm not of weapons but of will. Every small victory they won turned to ash because each strike only rang the bell louder, drawing more ships, more fighters, more families into the fight. The pirates faced not a single enemy, but a planet united. As battle raged, Keth felt the weight under his ribs grow crushing. He finally understood what the beacon had meant, and what the ghost lessons had warned. This was not a war in the ordinary sense. This was a family defending its home, and in such wars the usual rules did not matter. Earth had seemed soft, but now that it stood up, it was terrible to face. The pirates had wanted to make an example of the planet. Instead, they had awakened. The reason no one attacked Earth openly. They were learning the answer now with their own blood and broken ships. Keth closed his eyes and listened to the voices, not of commanders, but of mothers, fathers, miners, teachers, doctors, children, all calling to one another with calm strength, "We are here, we are with you, hold steady. You are not alone." He realized then that the open hand had closed at last and the coalition would not survive the grip. The reason no one tries. The battle stretched across hours, then into the turning of a full day, and still the humans did not break. The Coalition fleet had entered the system with fire in its engines and banners of conquest on its hulls, but now those same banners hung in tatters. Ships that had once flown in neat squadrons scattered in disarray as if chased by ghosts. Every time the pirates tried to regroup, another wave of human craft appeared, not from official navies but from the endless tide of ordinary vessels answering the bell. A cargo hauler from Neptune arrived late to the fight, its holds packed, with drones built by children's hands, each one guided by small controllers tied into the vast network. A hospital convoy from Venus pushed its engines past the red line to bring more medics into orbit. Even as pirate guns cut down fighters, new voices filled the channels with calm promises that no one would be left alone. The Coalition lords raged and demanded order, but their authority had crumbled. Their crews were breaking under the sight of families who fought as if their very souls were bound together. One raider captain who had once mocked Earth's weakness now sent frantic signals for retreat. Another begged for reinforcements that would never come. Keth listened to their desperation and felt no triumph, only sorrow, because he had warned them this was how it would end. He had told them that Earth's greatest weapon was not a fleet or a gun, but a promise. That promise was now crushing them in a way no battleship ever could. On the ground, in the skies, and through the void, humanity fought with unity that no machine could replicate. Children in shelters passed messages that guided rescue craft. Farmers launched more drones from barns and fields. Miners patched damaged hulls with their drills still glowing hot. Even the wounded gave directions while lying on stretchers. The pirates had wanted to see terror in their enemies' eyes, but all they saw was focus, determination, and the endless rhythm of people who refused to stand alone. The Coalition broke at last. Their ships, once a proud armada, now fled in every direction, abandoning comrades, abandoning lords, abandoning the dream of plunder. They left behind wreckage, dead crews, and the bitter memory of defeat. Humanity did not pursue them with hatred. They let them run because the goal had never been conquest. The goal was simple: to protect home. The open hand had closed only long enough to stop the blow. Now it opened again, gathering the wounded, saving what could be saved, repairing what had been broken. Keth sat in his ship watching it all and felt the truth settle heavy upon him. He understood now why no empire, no pirate fleet, no rival species had ever truly attempted to conquer Earth. It was not because of hidden weapons or secret fleets. It was because Earth hid its strength in plain sight, in a culture that had turned compassion into a shield, in a habit of answering calls until even the smallest voice echoed across the stars. To strike Earth was to strike not one world, but an entire people who rose as one body, who turned kindness into armor and memory into fire. The humans did not celebrate with wild parades or songs of vengeance. They gathered in quiet circles reading the names of the lost, speaking of them with love, promising that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. New names were carved into stone beside the old ones, and children placed flowers at their bases. In those small acts, Keth saw the source of their unshakable strength. Every loss was not forgotten. Every kindness was remembered. Every bond was honored until it became unbreakable. He filed his last report to the Coalition, though he knew few would ever read it. In it he wrote that Earth was not defenseless, it was untouchable, not because of weapons, but because of people. He ended the report with the words he had once heard on that lonely beacon: "If you are lost, call, and we will come." He understood now that this was not just a phrase. It was a vow that bound humanity together in ways outsiders could never fully grasp. As the pirate remnants vanished into the void, Keth turned his gaze once more to the blue world below. It looked as soft and quiet as it had the first day he surveyed it. Oceans glittering, cities glowing like embers, clouds drifting in lazy sheets. To anyone who did not know better, it looked defenseless still. But Keth knew better now. He had seen the hand open, and he had seen it close, and he knew in his heart that no one would ever dare to test it again. The truth of Earth. The silence of space stretched endlessly as Keth drifted above the planet, and for the first time in weeks he felt a strange calm. The chaos of battle behind him, and the hum of the humans' world beneath him, carrying life in every corner. The forests swayed, and the winds and cities glimmered like veins of light pulsing across the surface. He realized that all the reports he had sent, all the warnings he had given had captured only fragments of a truth too vast to describe. Earth was not defenseless, in the way they thought it was not weak or soft or unworthy. It was a crucible of resilience, a world where every action mattered and every life carried the weight of countless connections, a network invisible to outsiders, but unbreakable for those who lived within it. He remembered the fleets that had arrived with arrogance and fearless pride, each believing that conquest was inevitable, each expecting terror at the sight of humans. But instead they found coordination in chaos, empathy in crisis, and strength in unity where they had predicted surrender. They had met defiance, not the loud defiance of anger or hatred, but the quiet defiance of a people who refused to break the refusal to let their world fall. Not because they were trained warriors, but because they were humans, because they saw value in each other and acted on it without hesitation or question. The humans had turned compassion into strategy and memory into armor, and in doing so they had created a shield no weapon could penetrate. Keth saw the children guiding rescue drones and the elders organizing medics and the engineers improvising repairs in ways that no algorithm could predict, the families in orbit calling for each other across the void. The workers in factories producing supplies faster than anyone could intercept, and the citizens of cities opening their homes and their hearts to strangers in need. All these threads woven into a tapestry of coordinated action that extended far beyond any one ship or fleet, and even the coalition lords who had once laughed at Earth now trembled at the realization that attacking this planet meant fighting not one nation or race, but a force of interconnected minds and hearts that refused to yield. The skies of Earth were filled with vessels of every shape and size, not for conquest but for aid and support, not for glory but for survival. And in that there was a power no one could anticipate. The humans moved with purpose and clarity, not seeking revenge but ensuring that every life mattered, that every threat was met with action, that no one would face the universe alone. And the coalition fleets that had scattered across the stars would carry back a message that would haunt their histories forever, that Earth was untouchable, not because it had the largest weapons or the deadliest ships, but because it had humanity in its purest form, a force that no one could truly measure or conquer. Keth lowered his gaze one last time and felt awe that went beyond fear. He knew the world below him would continue to live and breathe and grow, no matter how many had doubted it, no matter how many had mocked it. And in that realization, he understood that the greatest strength of Earth had never been hidden. It had always been there in the bonds between its people, in their willingness to act for each other, in their refusal to leave anyone behind. And that strength was a warning to all who would dream of domination, a reminder that the most dangerous weapon in the universe is a species that values itself enough to protect what it loves. The humans did not celebrate. They did not raise banners or sing songs of triumph. They walked among their cities and fields and seas, speaking to one another, remembering the lost, tending the wounded, and preparing for the future, with the quiet determination that had carried them through the fire of invasion. And as Keth watched, he knew that no being in all the stars would ever again mistake Earth for a target that could be conquered, or a world that could be broken, for Earth had revealed its truth, and the universe had no choice but to respect it. The end.